Have you ever wondered what lengths a grandmother would go to protect her family? In this heartfelt true story, we'll take you through the hidden moments of strength and love that shaped a family. Stay with us. This is a story you won't want to miss. What did my grandma do when the family was attacked? The untold story. The moment of silence. It was late afternoon, the kind of quiet moment that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden glow across the room, and I sat by the window, staring at the street outside. There was nothing particularly unusual about that day. No loud noises, no unexpected visitors, but something in the air felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was an unshakable weight pressing down on my chest, as if an invisible curtain was about to fall, revealing something I wasn't ready to see. My grandmother, Nana, had always been the center of our world, the glue that held us together. She was a woman of quiet strength, a beacon of wisdom in a world that often felt chaotic. I remember her laugh, warm and full, always like a soft melody that could calm the stormiest of days. But on this day, as I sat in her old rocking chair, the familiar creaks of the wood beneath me seemed louder than usual. I couldn't help but feel as though something was lurking in the shadows, waiting to break the stillness. I hadn't heard from her in a while, and that was unusual. Nana was always so full of life, always had a story to share, a piece of advice, or simply a quiet presence that made you feel at home. Her absence in my life had been more noticeable in recent weeks. She had always been so strong, but lately there had been something different about her. A weariness in her eyes, a slower gait, like she was carrying the weight of something heavy, something that no one had ever talked about. But today, that silence was thick, pressing in on me. It wasn't like Nana to just disappear into silence. Even when her health had started to decline, even when she grew weaker with each passing year, she always managed to call or send a letter or make a small gesture that let us know she was still there, still holding on to everything with the same fierce love. But now, the silence felt like a warning. I reached for the old photo album on the shelf beside me, the one she had given me years ago. The leather cover was worn, the edges frayed from years of turning pages, but it still held the stories of our family, of the moments Nana had captured in time. Flipping through the pages, I stopped at a picture of her and my grandfather, a younger version of her, vibrant and full of life. They were standing in front of the house I had grown up in, arms wrapped around each other, both smiling as if nothing in the world could ever touch them. It was hard to imagine her as that woman now, the one who had faced so many trials and yet stood strong for the family. Time had a way of changing people, and I was starting to realize that perhaps Nana wasn't immune to it. Perhaps, after all these years, she was finally confronting something she had kept hidden, something she had never shared with any of us. As I sat there, the sound of the clock ticking in the background was the only thing that filled the room. Every tick felt like a reminder of how much time had passed, time that I had taken for granted. I realized then that I had been waiting for something to happen, waiting for Nana to come back, to return to us the way she always had. But now, in the midst of that silence, I wasn't sure if she was ever going to return in the same way again. And then, just as I was about to close the album, I heard it. A soft knock at the door. It was gentle, almost tentative, as if someone was uncertain about whether or not they should enter. I froze for a moment, my heart skipping a beat. It wasn't unusual for visitors to stop by, but something about that knock sent a chill through me. I didn't move, not right away. The silence hung between us like a thick fog, and I wondered if the answer to everything I had been feeling was standing just behind that door. I opened the door slowly, And standing there, with a solemn look in their eyes, was my cousin, Ethan. He had the same look his mother had when she found out her own mother had passed. That distant, haunted expression that made me realize that the world I thought I knew was about to shift in ways I couldn't have imagined. His voice broke the silence. "We need to talk. It's about Nana." And just like that, the quiet I had been so desperately holding on to shattered, and I knew, in that instant, that nothing would ever be the same again. The life she led. Ethan stepped inside, his face pale as if the weight of the moment was already too much to bear. I barely moved, frozen in the doorway. It felt as though I were holding my breath, waiting for him to speak, for him to say the words I already feared. He closed the door softly behind him, and then leaned against it, as if he needed the support to stay upright. "We're going to need to talk about everything, the way things really were," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, though my mind was spinning. I motioned toward the couch, and we both sat down in the quiet living room, a space that had always been a sanctuary of warmth and familiarity. Nana had spent countless hours here, her knitting needles clicking, her soft hum of a lullaby filling the air. This was her world, and it felt wrong to be here now without her. The room had become too still, as if time itself had stopped. "So, what happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as if saying it too loudly might break the fragile balance of calm that still lingered in the air. Ethan exhaled slowly, rubbing his face with both hands as though he was trying to process the weight of the words before speaking them. "It's not what you think. Nana. She's been keeping something from us. Something that, well, it's more than just her health. It's something deeper, something she's been hiding for years." My heart began to race, an uneasy feeling creeping through me. "What do you mean? What's been going on?" Ethan paused for a moment, looking at me as if deciding how much to say. "Nana hasn't been the same for a while. I know we've all seen it. The way she's been pulling away, the times when she's just stared into space for hours. It's been more than just aging. I think she's been living with a secret." I sat up straighter, leaning in. "What kind of secret?" "Ethan, what aren't you telling me?" He hesitated again, clearly torn between telling the truth and sparing me the pain of it. But the moment was long overdue for honesty. "She hasn't been just taking care of herself. She's been protecting us. From something. Someone." I felt a chill race down my spine. "Who? Who's she been protecting us from?" Ethan shifted, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know all the details yet, but it's someone from her past, someone who hurt her, and I think she's been living in fear of them. All these years. It's been eating her up inside, and I think it's finally caught up with her." I didn't know what to say. My mind reeled with the possibilities. Nana had always been the strong one, the one who kept our family grounded. The idea that she had been carrying this weight alone, in silence, for all these years seemed impossible. How could we have missed it? What kind of person would do that to her? I whispered, more to myself than to him. Nana had been through so much in her life. She had raised us, her grandchildren, after our parents passed, all while managing the house, keeping the family together. She had faced loss, illness, and hardship with a grace that few could ever understand. And yet, there was something we didn't know. Something dark. Something that had been haunting her for decades. Ethan leaned forward, his face drawn. "I think it's someone from when she was young. Someone she trusted. Someone who betrayed her in the worst way, and she never let on. Never told anyone. She wanted to protect us, to protect you and me from the ugly parts of her past. But now it's all coming to light." I closed my eyes, trying to process this new reality. The Nana I had known, the woman who was always so composed, so full of love, had a history that we had never truly understood. A history filled with pain and fear, one that she had never shared with us. But why now? I finally asked, my voice breaking. Why is this coming out now? After all these years? Ethan's eyes met mine, and I could see the sadness there. Because it's catching up with her. Her health has been declining, but I think it's more than just age. She's been reliving it all. The stress, the fear, it's been eating away at her. And now, I think she's afraid of what will happen if it all comes crashing down. My heart sank as I thought about what Ethan was saying. Nana was old, yes, but she was strong. How could something from her past have such a hold on her now? How could it still be affecting her this much? I reached for the photo album on the coffee table, flipping through the pages absent-mindedly. There was a picture of Nana from when she was young, bright-eyed and smiling, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. He had his arm around her, and she seemed so happy, so full of life. But looking closer, I could see something in her eyes. A shadow. It was subtle, but it was there. "Who is this?" I asked, pointing to the man in the photo. Ethan's face paled even more. "That's him. The one who hurt her." I froze, the room feeling suddenly colder. The silence between us was heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. The man in the photo was someone we had never heard about. Someone from Nana's past that had remained locked away in the dark corners of her mind. I didn't know what to say. But deep down, I knew the truth. Nana had been carrying this secret for too long, and it was finally starting to break her down. Family and the untold story. I sat there, holding the photo in my hand, trying to wrap my mind around what Ethan had just told me. The image of Nana as a young woman, radiant and hopeful, contrasted so sharply with the woman I knew now. The layers of time had built a fortress around her, and in that moment, I realized how little I truly knew about her life before I was born. It felt like we had been living in a shadow, unaware of the truth that had always lurked just out of sight. Nana had always been the one to nurture, to hold us together through every storm. She was the rock of our family. But as I looked at the photo and heard Ethan's words, I began to wonder if that rock had ever truly been unshakable, or if over time it had simply weathered storms that no one could see. And the question that haunted me now was this: what had she been protecting us from all these years? What had she endured that was so dark, so painful, that she had kept it hidden from all of us? "Nana never told us about him," I said, breaking the silence. My voice trembled as the weight of her silence began to settle in. Why didn't she tell anyone? Why keep it all inside? Ethan's eyes met mine, and I could see the same confusion, the same sadness that had clouded my thoughts. I think she was trying to protect us. I think she didn't want us to know about him, about what happened. She didn't want her pain to be our pain. And maybe she didn't want us to see her as weak. I could understand that, to some extent. Nana had always been the strong one, the matriarch of our family. She had raised us after our parents died, and she had done it with such grace, never once letting us feel like we were missing anything. She made sure we never went to bed hungry, that our birthdays were celebrated with love, and that we always knew how much we were valued. She was the definition of resilience, the kind of person who would put everyone else's needs before her own. But now, I realized that there was a part of her life that we had never been allowed to see. A part that was locked away, buried under layers of time and unspoken words. "We have to find out more," I said, almost to myself. "We need to know what really happened. What did he do to her? Ethan shifted uneasily in his seat. I don't know if we can, honestly. Nana, she's been through enough. I don't think she wants us digging into her past, especially now. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness rising within me. But how can we help her if we don't know the truth? We can't just let this go. We owe it to her to understand what she's been carrying all these years. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he seemed to wrestle with his own thoughts. Finally, he spoke. You're right. We do owe it to her. But we also need to be careful. We don't know what kind of impact this could have on her, especially now that she's already so fragile. I nodded, though the frustration inside me didn't subside. It wasn't fair. Nana had given everything to protect us, and now, at the time when she needed us the most, we were left in the dark, unable to help her in the way she had always helped us. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, not by Nana, but by time itself. All these years, we had lived under the illusion that everything was fine, that our family was whole, that Nana was invincible. But now, with Ethan's words hanging heavy in the air, I realized that the woman who had held us all together was just as human as the rest of us, and she had been carrying a burden too great to bear alone. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, I glanced out the window again, seeing the familiar sight of the old oak tree in the front yard. It had always been there, a constant presence in my life, but now, even that seemed different, as though it too was part of a bigger story I hadn't understood. The house, the family, the love. It all felt like a fragile house of cards that had been carefully constructed over time. And now, with one gust of wind, it seemed like everything might come crashing down. We need to find her, I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing in my mind. We need to talk to Nana. She's been holding on to this for so long. It's time she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide. What do you mean? You want to confront her? Ask her about the past? I nodded firmly. Yes. I think it's time. We can't wait any longer. If there's a chance we can help her, if there's any way we can give her the peace she deserves, then we have to do it. Ethan sighed, clearly torn. I don't know. I'm scared of what it might do to her. But I understand. I'll help you. I think it's time for us to know the whole truth, even if it's painful. We both sat there in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the moment sinking in. The truth was no longer something we could run from. It was here, staring us in the face, and we had no choice but to face it head on. I stood up, my mind made up. We're going to find Nana. We're going to make sure she knows we're here for her, no matter what. Ethan followed me to the door, his shoulders heavy with the same realization. As we stepped outside into the cool evening air, the world around us seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The first loss. It wasn't until the next morning that the weight of what we had decided to do hit me. Ethan and I had spent the night discussing everything, weighing our options, but now, as the daylight filtered through the curtains and bathed the house in a soft glow, the reality of our plan sank in. We were going to confront Nana. We were going to ask her about the past she'd hidden from us. I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she used to call me to the kitchen for a glass of lemonade, the smell of her homemade bread always filling the air. That's who Nana had been to me. An anchor. A constant. But now, the thought of facing her with questions that might shatter the image I'd always had of her seemed almost too much to bear. Ethan had already gone to see her earlier that morning. He'd left a message on her voicemail the night before, asking if she'd be open to having a conversation. He was trying to prepare her, but I knew deep down that nothing could fully prepare her for the flood of questions we had. When he returned, the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. "She's not doing well, you know," he said softly, his voice heavy. "She didn't even recognize me at first. Her mind seems so far away. I don't think she's been fully present for a while now. I'm worried. I'm really worried." I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just worried about the past. He was worried about Nana's future. And I understood. We all were. But there was still something gnawing at me. Something more pressing than the fear of her fading away. It was the fear of what we would uncover when we finally dug into her past. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "We can't let her hide from us anymore. She's been alone with this for too long." Ethan nodded, but his expression didn't soften. "I know, but we have to be careful. If she shuts us out, we can't force her. We can't break her. She's been through too much already." I reached for my coat, determined to face whatever came next. As I walked out the door, the cold air hit my face like a slap, waking me up to the reality of the situation. Nana had never been one to ask for help. She had always stood tall, a woman of quiet strength, silently carrying the burden of others. But now, for the first time, I wasn't sure if she was strong enough to bear it any longer. When we arrived at Nana's house, the familiar sight of her small, cozy home brought a wave of nostalgia. It felt strange to be standing outside it now, knowing we were about to ask questions that would change everything. I knocked softly on the door, unsure of what to expect. It took a few moments for her to answer, but when she did, my heart caught in my throat. Nana looked older, thinner, frailer than I had ever seen her. Her once bright eyes were clouded with a distant look, and her hands trembled slightly as she held the doorknob. "Come in, my dears," she said in a soft voice, but there was no warmth behind it. She stepped aside, letting us into the house, but it wasn't the house I remembered. The rooms seemed emptier somehow, as though they too were waiting for something to be revealed. We sat down together in the living room, the same room where we'd spent countless hours talking, laughing, and simply being together. But now, there was a quiet tension in the air. I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on all of us. "Nana," I began, my voice faltering, "we need to talk. About what's been going on. About everything." She looked at me with a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "What's been going on?" she repeated softly, almost as if she were testing the question herself. "Nothing, dear. Nothing has changed." I hesitated, unsure of how to begin. How do you approach something like this, with the woman who had raised you? The woman who had always been the pillar of strength in your life? But I couldn't back down now. "Grandma, we know you've been hiding something from us. We know you've been dealing with something for a long time, and we want to understand. We want to help." At my words, Nana's face seemed to tighten, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. It disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by a calm, almost resigned expression. "I don't know what you mean, dear," she said softly. But there was an edge to her voice now, a wall that I could feel rising between us. "Nana," Ethan chimed in gently, his voice trembling, "we're not angry with you. We just want to know what happened. We want to understand why you've been so distant." She was silent for a long time, her eyes downcast. Then she looked up at us, and the weight of her gaze seemed to pierce right through me. There was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. For the first time, I realized that she wasn't the strong, indestructible woman I had always known. She was a woman who had been carrying a secret, and it was killing her. "I don't know how to tell you this," she began, her voice shaky. "But you're right. There's something I've been keeping from you. Something that's been haunting me for many years." Ethan and I exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. We were finally going to hear it. The truth. The story we had been missing all this time. And so, in the quiet of that living room, as the sunlight filtered through the windows, Nana began to speak. She began to tell us the story of a past we had never known, a past that would change everything we thought we knew about her. The years of plenty Nana's story, the truth that had lived hidden for so long, left an uncomfortable silence hanging in the room. The air felt thick with all that had been unsaid for decades, and I could sense the weight of her confession pressing on the walls of the old house. It was a weight that no one in our family had ever been prepared for, yet somehow it had always been there, lingering just beneath the surface. I looked at Nana, her frail hands now resting in mine, her face streaked with the tears that had been building up for years. She was no longer the strong, indomitable figure I had always known. Instead, she was a woman who had carried the burden of silence for far too long. And now, as we sat there together, I realized that she needed us more than ever. The years of pretending, the years of burying the past, they were finally catching up with her. "I never wanted you to know," Nana whispered, her voice barely audible as she wiped away the tears that had stained her cheeks. "I never wanted to burden you with my mistakes, my pain. I thought I could protect you all by hiding it." I could feel the heaviness in her words, the guilt that weighed her down. But the thing that struck me the most was how much she had sacrificed to keep us safe from her past. She had kept her secrets locked away so tightly, hidden in a place where none of us could see, because she thought it was the only way to keep us from suffering. She believed that keeping the truth from us was an act of love, a way of protecting us from a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. But now, I saw the cost of that decision. I saw it in her eyes, in the way her body trembled, in the lines that time and pain had carved into her face. I saw the toll that years of keeping secrets had taken on her spirit. "Nana," I said softly, squeezing her hand. "You didn't protect us by keeping this from us. You protected us by loving us, by being there for us every day. You gave us everything, even when you had nothing left for yourself. You did what you thought was best, and we can never repay you for that." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "But now I've broken that trust. I've kept something from you, all that I should have shared long ago." I shook my head, not wanting her to carry that guilt any longer. "No, Nana, you didn't break anything. You've been there for us, through everything, and now it's our turn to be here for you. We can help you carry this. You don't have to face it alone anymore." Ethan, who had been silently listening, finally spoke up. "We're not angry, Nana. We understand now. You've been through more than any of us could ever imagine. And we can't change what happened, but we can help you heal." The words seemed to hang in the air, offering some kind of reassurance. Nana took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like years. It was as if she was finally letting go of the weight she had carried for so long. Slowly, she nodded. "I'm tired, Ethan," Nana said softly. "I've been tired for a long time, but I feel lighter now, knowing you know, knowing I don't have to hide it anymore." I could feel the flood of emotions in the room, a mixture of sadness, relief, and understanding. Nana had carried this burden for far too long, and now that the truth was out, I could see the healing begin to take place, even if it was just a small step. But it was a step nonetheless. A step toward forgiveness, a step toward peace. "You've carried this burden for too long, Nana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But you're not carrying it anymore. We're here for you, all of us. We'll face this together. We'll heal together." And in that moment, I realized something else. Something I had never fully understood before. Healing wasn't just about facing the past. It was about finding the strength to move forward, together. It was about forgiveness, about letting go of the things that weighed us down, and about being strong enough to build a future that was free from the shadows of the past. Nana looked at us, her eyes softening, her lips curling into a faint but genuine smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on me." We sat there in silence for a while, each of us lost in our thoughts. But this time, it was a comfortable silence. A silence that felt less like a burden and more like the calm before something new, something healing. As I looked at Nana, I realized that the years of plenty weren't just about the good times, the laughter, or the easy moments. They were about the resilience, the love, and the sacrifices that we didn't always see. They were about the times we chose to keep going, even when the road ahead seemed impossible. And in that moment, I knew that our family was stronger than any secret, any pain, or any fear from the past. We would face whatever came next together, and for the first time, I truly believed that Nana could finally heal. We all could. The quiet reminder. The days that followed Nana's revelation were a blur of emotions, conversations, and decisions. It felt like we were all collectively holding our breath, unsure of how to process what we had learned. In some ways, it seemed as though the world had shifted beneath us, leaving us to grapple with the weight of the past that had finally come to light. Nana was still fragile, but there was a subtle change in her, a sense of relief, of freedom, that hadn't been there before. Yet, the road to healing wasn't as simple as just uncovering the truth. As much as we wanted to comfort her, as much as we tried to reassure ourselves that everything would be okay, there were still moments when the past crept back into the present, like an unwelcome visitor. The silence between us, which had once felt warm and comfortable, now felt heavy with unspoken words, unresolved pain, and a shared understanding that nothing would ever be the same again. It was during one of those moments, late one afternoon, that something triggered the flood of memories we had all been avoiding. I was sitting in the kitchen, quietly stirring a cup of tea, when I noticed Nana's old record player sitting on the windowsill. The small, weathered turntable hadn't been used in years, and I hadn't even realized it was still there. But something about it caught my attention that afternoon. It was as if it were beckoning me, reminding me of something long forgotten. I glanced at Ethan, who was sitting across the room, watching the light fade through the curtains. "Do you remember when Nana used to play her records?" I asked, my voice breaking the stillness. Ethan didn't answer right away. He simply looked at the turntable, his brow furrowing, as if searching for a memory that had been buried under years of silence. "Yeah, I remember," he said quietly. "She used to play them all the time, mostly old jazz and blues, always in the mornings when we'd wake up. It's funny, I hadn't thought about that in ages." I got up and walked over to the record player, gently lifting the needle. The familiar crackle of the vinyl filled the air, and for a brief moment, the room felt like it had stepped back in time. The soft melody of an old Billie Holiday song began to fill the room, and I could almost see Nana in her prime, sitting in the corner of the kitchen, humming along to the music while she made breakfast. It was a simple, peaceful memory, one that now seemed so distant, almost unreal. Nana, hearing the music, shuffled into the room, her frailty apparent as she leaned on the doorframe. Her eyes were clouded with age, But when she heard the song, something flickered in them, a brief spark of recognition. She smiled softly, her lips curling as the music seemed to take her somewhere else, somewhere safe, somewhere before the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. "That song," she murmured, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "That was our song. Your grandfather loved it. He used to say it reminded him of the good old days when everything felt easy." I felt a lump form in my throat. The good old days. How many times had Nana said that phrase, always with a wistful tone, always with a smile that never quite reached her eyes? Now I understood why. The good old days had been a time when Nana had been young and full of hope, a time before the secrets and pain had taken root in her life. And even now, all these years later, that pain still lingered beneath the surface, hiding behind the smiles, the songs, the memories of better times. Ethan stood up slowly, walking over to Nana. He took her hand gently, and for a moment, the three of us stood there, listening to the music. The warmth of the moment was bittersweet, and I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest. "I used to play that song for him, you know," Nana continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I played it when things were good, when we still had hope. It was our song. And even though it's been so long, I can still hear him singing along. I can still feel him beside me, like we were in another lifetime." Her words hung in the air, heavy with memories that hadn't been shared before, memories that had been locked away for so long. It was as though the music had unlocked something inside her, something that had been buried deep within her heart for decades. "Nana," I said softly, "you don't have to carry this alone anymore. We're here, and we're going to face everything together. You don't have to be alone with this pain." Nana's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for someone to finally say those words, waiting for the comfort of knowing that she didn't have to be alone anymore. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't a solution to everything she had endured. But it was something. It was the beginning of healing, the first crack in the wall that had separated her from the rest of us for so long. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up on me." And in that moment, I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about pretending it didn't exist or hoping that time would magically make everything better. Healing was about facing the truth, about embracing the pain, and about finding strength in each other. It was about accepting the broken parts and finding a way to put them back together, piece by piece. The music played on, filling the room with its soft melody, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were finally starting to heal. Together. The awakening. It's strange, really, how the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. After that day, after Nana finally shared the truth, it felt as though we had all been living in a fog for years. Not just her, but all of us. We had been so focused on the present, on getting through our day-to-day lives, that we hadn't realized how much the weight of the past was still holding us down. But now, the fog was beginning to lift, and we could finally see the world around us with clearer eyes. For days after Nana's revelation, things felt unsettled. It wasn't that we were angry or upset, not at her at least. But there was a tension in the house, a collective realization that everything had changed. The house that had once felt so familiar, so comforting, now seemed full of echoes of a past we had never fully understood. I kept thinking about the music, about the way Nana's face had softened when she spoke of the good old days, before everything fell apart. But how do you reconcile the woman you thought you knew with the woman she had been hiding? How do you face the truth of a family member's past without feeling as though the very ground beneath you has shifted? Ethan and I spent the next few days talking more than we ever had. We spoke about the past, about Nana, about what we had learned, and about what we still didn't know. We tried to make sense of it all, but the truth was, we weren't sure how. Nana's past wasn't just about what she had been through. It was about how it had shaped her, how it had molded the woman she had become. And yet, even after everything we had learned, there were still questions. There were still things that didn't make sense. One afternoon, I went to visit Nana again. She was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, a soft blanket draped over her lap, her hands resting in her lap as she stared out at the garden. The sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow over her face, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I remembered. The Nana who had always been there, who had always kept everything together. I sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. There were still so many things left unsaid between us, things that had been left in the shadows. But today, for the first time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Maybe it was because we had finally uncovered the truth. Or maybe it was because I had seen the strength in Nana that I had never fully appreciated before. She was still here. She had survived, and now we were all in this together. "Nana," I said softly, "how are you feeling? Really?" She looked at me with tired eyes, but there was something in her gaze that was different from before. There was a quiet strength, an acceptance, that I hadn't seen in her before. "I'm okay, dear," she replied quietly, her voice steady. "I've been carrying this for so long. It's almost like I've forgotten what it feels like to breathe freely." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. For years, Nana had been carrying the weight of her past on her shoulders, hiding it from the world, from us. But now, she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. We were here, and we were going to help her, help all of us, heal. I reached over and took her hand gently. "We're going to be okay, Nana. We're here for you. You don't have to keep holding it all in." She gave me a small, knowing smile, and for the first time in a long while, it was genuine. "I know, dear," she said softly. "I know." The room seemed to grow quieter as we sat together, and I could feel the weight of everything that had happened. But I also felt the possibility of something new. Nana had opened up to us, had shared the burden of her past, and for the first time I felt a shift in the air. It wasn't about erasing the pain or pretending that everything was fine. It was about accepting it, about letting go of the fear that had kept us from facing the truth. And maybe, just maybe, it was about forgiveness, not just of others but of ourselves. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, I found myself thinking about what Nana had said earlier, about the good old days. It was clear to me now that those days had been a lie, at least in the way she had remembered them. The good old days hadn't been perfect. They hadn't been free of pain or hardship, but they had been real. And sometimes, we need to acknowledge the truth of the past, no matter how difficult it is, in order to truly move forward. As the days turned into weeks, Nana began to open up more. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always comfortable, but we kept talking. We kept listening. We kept healing, piece by piece. And as time passed, I began to see the change in her. The walls she had built around herself were slowly starting to crumble, and in their place, a new version of Nana began to emerge. A version that was more vulnerable, more human, but also more resilient than I had ever known her to be. Ethan and I spent more time with her, not just as her grandchildren, but as the people who were going to help her carry the weight of her past, together. We weren't going to let her carry it alone anymore. And in doing so, I began to realize that we, too, were healing. Not just from the past, but from the weight of our own fears and misunderstandings. I left Nana's house that evening feeling a sense of peace, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for certain. We were no longer living in the shadow of the past. We were living in the light of truth, and that was the beginning of something new. The search for answers. In the days that followed Nana's revelation, something inside me shifted. It was as though the truth, now out in the open, had awakened something deep within all of us. But while Nana's confession had lightened her heart, there was still so much that was left unspoken. So many details still hung in the air, untold stories that had shaped her life, but had remained hidden. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces of the puzzle still missing. I started to ask questions, ones that had never crossed my mind before. What had really happened to Nana all those years ago? Who was the man she had married? How had he changed, and why had she stayed with him for so long? Every question seemed to lead to more questions, and though I could see Nana's pain, I couldn't let it go. I needed answers. It was clear to me now that the road to healing for our family wasn't just about forgiving Nana or understanding her past. It was about uncovering the full truth, every dark corner, every hidden detail, so that we could finally understand who she was, not just as the woman who had raised us, but as the person she had been before she became the Nana we knew. She had lived a life before us, and I wanted to know what that life had been like, even if the answers were difficult to face. I started with the few things I knew: Nana's old house, her past life, and the man she had once loved. Ethan and I began digging through old family records, letters, and photos. We spent hours in Nana's attic, sifting through boxes filled with forgotten memories. The dust settled in the air like a fog, as if the attic had been sealed for decades, just like the secrets we were uncovering. In one of the boxes, we found something unexpected: an old journal. The leather cover was worn, and the pages were yellowed with age, but it was clear that this journal had once meant something important to Nana. It was almost as if she had kept it hidden all this time, just out of reach, hoping no one would find it. But now, there it was, right in front of me, a key to a past that had remained locked away. I flipped open the journal, scanning the delicate handwriting. The entries were sporadic, covering years of her life that I had never known about. Years before she met my grandfather. Years before she became the Nana we all loved so much. The journal was filled with reflections on love, on loss, on the choices that had shaped her destiny. But what struck me the most were the words that were written in the final pages, as though Nana had finally come to terms with the past she had been so reluctant to share. "He came back," one entry read. "He said he had changed. But I can't believe him. I can't let myself believe him. Not after everything. I have to protect my family. I can't let him back in." The words were like a slap in the face, and I felt a deep ache in my chest as I read them. It was clear now that Nana's pain hadn't just been about the physical abuse she had suffered. It was about the betrayal, the emotional scars that no one had seen. And as I read on, I realized that the man she had married, the one who had betrayed her so completely, wasn't just a shadow from her past. He was still part of our story, still haunting our family in ways we hadn't fully understood. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Ethan, who had been reading over my shoulder, looked up at me, his face pale. "I can't believe it. She knew all along, but she never said anything." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. She was protecting us, but I think she was also trying to protect herself. She never wanted us to know the truth about him. She wanted to forget. But now, the truth was impossible to ignore. The man Nana had married was not just a figure in her past. He was a ghost that had haunted her every decision, every relationship. He had shaped her in ways we hadn't understood. And for all these years, Nana had kept that truth locked away, hoping that if she ignored it long enough, it would go away. "How do we even begin to tell her?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to reconcile this new version of Nana with the woman I had always known. The Nana who had always been our rock, who had taught us to be strong, to be kind, and to never give up. How could we reconcile that woman with the woman in the journal? The woman who had been hurt, betrayed, and broken, but who had kept it all hidden for the sake of her family? We couldn't go back, not now. The truth was out, and no matter how painful it was, we had to face it. Over the next few days, I went back to Nana's house with the journal. I sat with her in the living room, the space that had once been filled with laughter and warmth, but now felt cold and distant. The light streaming through the windows seemed dimmer somehow, as if the truth we had uncovered had stolen some of the brightness from the room. "Nana," I said softly, "I found something. Something that you never told me." Her eyes flickered with a mix of fear and resignation, as if she had been waiting for this moment. She didn't say anything, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly in her lap. She knew. She knew this conversation was coming. "I found your journal," I continued, my voice shaking, "and I think it's time we talk about what really happened. About him. About everything." There was a long pause, a silence that stretched on forever, before Nana finally spoke. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "I was hoping you wouldn't find it." And just like that, the walls that had been built around her for so long began to crumble. We were finally going to face the past, together. And as hard as it was, I knew that this was the only way we could all heal. A revelation. The room felt quieter than it ever had before. The air was thick with anticipation, and as I sat there across from Nana, holding the journal in my lap, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Her gaze never left me, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps, or maybe regret. But there was something else too, something that made her look like she was preparing for a storm, bracing herself for what was about to come. I sat in the silence for a moment, wondering how to start. How do you approach a lifetime of secrets, a lifetime of buried pain, with nothing but honesty as your weapon? There was so much I didn't understand, so much that had remained hidden from me for so long. But the time for ignorance was over. The truth had to come out, even if it was painful. "Nana," I said, my voice steady but trembling with emotion, "I need you to tell me what happened with him. I need to understand why you kept this from us, from me." Her face tightened, the skin around her eyes pulling as if the memories were still raw, still fresh. I could see the conflict in her expression, the deep desire to protect us, to shield us from the ugliness of her past, but also the realization that the walls had finally crumbled and the truth could no longer be ignored. "I never wanted you to know," Nana began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I just kept it to myself, if I buried it deep enough, then maybe it would go away. Maybe I could protect you from the darkness of it all." I nodded, gently urging her to continue. "But it didn't go away, did it?" She shook her head, her lips pressed tightly together as she gathered her thoughts. It never went away. Not completely. And I was so scared that if you really knew what happened, you wouldn't see me the same way. You wouldn't love me the same way. I didn't want you to look at me and see someone broken. I felt my heart ache for her in that moment. I could see the weight of years, decades really, of guilt and shame that she had carried alone. The woman who had always been strong, the woman who had raised us with such love and tenderness, had been living with a brokenness that no one had known about. A brokenness she had never allowed herself to share. "Nana, we don't see you that way," I said gently, my voice filled with sincerity. "We love you, all of you, no matter what." But Nana wasn't listening to me. Her eyes had grown distant again, her thoughts clearly drifting back to a time long past, to a place she had tried so hard to forget. Slowly she began to speak again, her voice almost as if she were talking to herself, revisiting a memory that she had locked away. "I met him when I was just 22, she began, her voice hollow. "He was charming, kind, everything I thought I wanted. I was young, naive. I thought I could trust him. I thought he would be the one to give me the life I dreamed of. And for a while, it was like a dream. We traveled, we laughed, we made plans for a future together. He was everything I ever wanted." I could hear the sadness in her voice, the longing for a time that had been full of hope before it was shattered beyond repair. The pain was palpable, and I could only imagine what it must have been like to feel that kind of betrayal, that kind of devastation. "But then," Nana continued, her voice trembling slightly, "everything changed. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was always there, just waiting to come out. But the first time he hit me, I didn't know how to react. I thought I had done something wrong, that I had somehow caused it. And I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that the man I loved could be capable of that." Her voice cracked, and she paused, as though the memory itself was too painful to relive. I felt my heart break for her, but I didn't say anything. I just listened, letting her speak, letting her tell the story she had been hiding for so long. "He apologized, of course," she continued after a long pause. "He said he was sorry, that he would never do it again. And for a while, I believed him. But then it happened again, and again. And each time, it felt like a part of me was dying, like I was losing who I was. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought I could fix it. I thought I could change him. And then I found out I was pregnant with your father." Her hands trembled as she spoke, and I could see the weight of that moment, that decision, playing out in her mind. The decision to stay, to try to make it work, despite everything that was happening. She had done it for us, for the family she had dreamed of building. But in the end, the price was far too high. "I couldn't leave," she whispered. "I couldn't leave him when I was carrying your father. I didn't want to be a single mother. I didn't want to break up our family. So I stayed. I stayed and tried to pretend that things were fine, that we were a normal family. But I was dying inside. I was terrified, every single day, terrified that one day I wouldn't be able to protect you." Her words hung in the air like a cloud, and I could feel the weight of them, heavy and suffocating. The fear she had lived with, the isolation, the guilt, all of it had been buried for so long. And now here we were, learning about it for the first time. I should have left. I should have told someone. I should have asked for help. But I didn't. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting you by pretending it wasn't happening. And now I see that it wasn't the right thing at all. I reached out, placing my hand gently on hers. "Nana, you did the best you could with what you had. And we're here now. We're here for you. And we always will be." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, but this time there was a sense of relief in them. The weight that had been hanging over her for so long was finally beginning to lift. And for the first time, she wasn't alone in her pain. "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know, and I'm so sorry. So sorry for not telling you sooner." I squeezed her hand, offering her the comfort she had so desperately needed for years. "You don't have to apologize. You don't owe us anything. We're here now. We'll get through this together." In that moment, I realized that it wasn't just Nana who needed healing. We all did. And for the first time, we were all ready to face the past. Together. The reckoning. The days that followed Nana's confession felt surreal. It was as though everything had changed, yet nothing had. The weight of her words lingered in the air, and with every passing moment, it became clear that the truth, once unearthed, couldn't be easily put back. Ethan and I had spent hours in quiet reflection, trying to absorb what Nana had shared. And though we wanted to believe that the truth would bring peace, there was still an undeniable tension that hung over us, the fear of what would come next. After all, healing wasn't something that could be done overnight. It wasn't a clean break or a neat resolution. It was messy. It was painful. And it would take time. One evening, a week after Nana's confession, Ethan and I decided that it was time for us to sit down with her again. The music had played its role in bringing us closer, but now it was time for the real conversation. We needed to know what else we hadn't understood, what else Nana had kept hidden all these years. It was time to confront the past fully, no more avoiding it, no more pretending that everything was fine. We arrived at Nana's house as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the soft light filtering through the window. Nana was sitting in her usual spot in the living room, her favorite armchair, with a cup of tea in hand. The room felt warmer now, somehow, with the truth in the open. But there was still a distance between us, a barrier that had been built over decades of silence. "Nana," I began softly, "we need to talk again. About everything." She looked up at me, her tired eyes soft but resolute. She had never been a woman to shy away from difficult conversations, but I could see the exhaustion in her face, the toll that all of this had taken on her. She had carried so much for so long, and now that we were finally asking questions, I could tell that the burden was heavy on her shoulders. "I know," Nana replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I've kept from you. It's not easy to talk about, but I think it's time." Ethan and I sat down on the couch opposite her, both of us silent, waiting for her to continue. There was no rush, no need to force anything. The silence between us was comfortable now, a kind of mutual understanding that we were all in this together, no matter how painful the truth might be. "I've lived with so many regrets," Nana said, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I should have left him long before I did. I should have told someone, anyone, what was happening. But I was scared. I was scared of losing my family, scared of being alone. And when I finally left him, it was like I was running from something that had already broken me." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I could see it now. The choices she had made, the sacrifices she had endured in silence. She had been trapped, not just in an abusive marriage, but in a world of isolation and fear. And though I had always admired her strength, I had never fully understood the pain that had shaped her. "I stayed in that marriage because I thought I had to," Nana continued, her voice trembling. "I thought that staying for your father's sake, for the family's sake, would make everything better. But it never did. It just made things worse." Ethan reached over and took her hand, his eyes filled with sympathy. Nana, we understand. You were doing what you thought was best at the time, but you don't have to carry that weight anymore. We're here now. You don't have to protect us from the past anymore. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. But it's hard to let go. It's hard to admit that I failed, that I wasn't strong enough to protect you, to protect myself. Nana, you did the best you could, I said softly. You've done so much for us. We don't see you as broken. We see you as strong, stronger than anyone we know. There was a long pause, and for a moment, it felt like the world outside had stopped moving. We were in this moment together, not as a grandmother and her grandchildren, but as three people bound by the same truth. Nana had carried this secret for so long, and now that it was out, it felt like a weight had been lifted from all of us. But even as we sat there, speaking the truth, I knew that there was more to uncover. More that Nana had kept hidden. More that needed to be said. And though I was afraid of what else we might learn, I knew that we had to keep going. We couldn't stop now. We couldn't turn back. Nana, I said after a long pause, is there anything else? Anything else we need to know? She looked at me, her face weary but resolute. There's one thing, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't just leave him because of the abuse. I left because I couldn't live in fear anymore. But when I left, I didn't just leave him behind. I left a part of myself too. And I think that's what's been haunting me all these years. I didn't understand what she meant at first, but as she spoke, I began to piece it together. Nana hadn't just left an abusive marriage. She had left behind a part of herself, a part that had been swallowed up by fear, by the need to protect others, by the choices she had made. And that, I realized, was the most painful part of all. You didn't just lose him, Nana, I said gently. You lost yourself. And I think that's something we all need to heal from, together. Nana's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her as the woman she had once been. Not just the grandmother who had always been strong, but the woman who had loved, who had fought, and who had sacrificed so much. And in that moment, I knew that healing wasn't just about facing the past. It was about rediscovering who she was, who she had always been, and learning to love herself again. You don't have to lose yourself anymore, I said softly, reaching for her hand. We're here to help you find that part of you again. Nana nodded, her tears flowing freely now. I'm so tired, she whispered. But maybe, just maybe, I can finally start to heal. We sat together in silence, the truth finally laid bare between us, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all free. The aftermath. The days that followed our conversation with Nana were a mixture of quiet reflection and uneasy tension. There was a sense of calm, but it was fragile, like walking on thin ice, unsure of when it might crack. The weight of the past had finally been acknowledged. But that didn't mean the hurt had magically disappeared. It was as if Nana had opened a door to a room we had never known existed, and now that we had seen what was inside, we had to figure out how to live with it. I watched Nana closely in the days after our conversation. There were moments when she seemed lighter, as if the burden of keeping that secret had lifted slightly. She smiled more, and though her body still showed signs of the weariness that age had brought, her spirit seemed to have a little more light in it. But there were also moments of deep sadness, when she would sit by the window, staring into the garden, her mind clearly far away. I knew she was processing the pain of her past, confronting everything she had kept hidden for so long. Ethan and I tried to be there for her, but it wasn't always easy. We had opened the door, But now the real work of healing had begun. It wasn't going to happen overnight, and it wasn't going to be easy. There were no guarantees that the pain would go away, only that we were all willing to face it, together. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room, I found myself thinking about the past. About Nana's life before all of this. Before the secrets. Before the pain. I thought about what she must have been like when she was young, full of hope, dreaming of a life full of love and joy. I tried to imagine what it would have been like for her, that girl who had once believed in a fairy tale, to watch it all unravel in front of her eyes. I picked up the journal again, running my fingers over the worn leather cover. There were so many pages filled with memories, but there was one entry that stood out, one that I couldn't stop thinking about. Nana had written about the moment she decided to leave him, about the decision to walk away from everything she had known, everything she had believed in. I thought I was making the right choice, she had written. But when I walked out that door, I didn't just leave him behind. I left a piece of me there too. A piece that I can never get back. The words haunted me. I could feel the pain in them, the deep regret, the fear of what she had lost. But I also knew that she had done what she had to do. She had protected us, had kept us safe even when it meant losing herself in the process. And now, after all these years, we had the chance to help her find that piece of herself again. As I sat there, deep in thought, the door opened, and Nana walked in, her steps slow but purposeful. She had always been a woman of grace, but now there was something different about her. Something quieter, more introspective, but also more open. She had always been the strong one, but now I saw her for what she truly was. A woman who had lived through pain, who had fought to survive, and who had never once given up on her family, no matter the cost. "I've been thinking," Nana said softly, breaking my reverie. "About everything. About the past, and about what's happened in the last few days." I looked up at her, a sense of unease creeping over me. "What have you been thinking about?" "I've been thinking about forgiveness," she continued, her voice tinged with a mix of sadness and resolve. "I've always thought that forgiveness was something you did for someone else. That you forgave them because it was the right thing to do. But I've realized that forgiveness isn't just for them. It's for you. It's for me. I have to forgive myself, and I have to forgive him." I felt a lump form in my throat. "You don't have to forgive him, Nana," I said gently, my voice shaking with emotion. "Not if you're not ready." She smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. "I know. But holding on to that hatred, that anger, it's been killing me. I've been carrying it all these years, and it's weighed me down so much that I've forgotten who I am. I can't keep living like this." I didn't know what to say. There were no words that could fix the years of pain, the scars that ran so deep. But I understood what she was saying. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past or forgetting what had happened. It was about releasing the grip that the past had on her so that she could finally breathe again. "I'm not there yet," she continued, her voice steady but full of vulnerability. "But I'm starting to let go. And that's the first step. I've spent so many years trying to protect you all, trying to protect myself, that I forgot how to protect my own heart. I've let it harden, and I've let it keep me from moving forward. But now I'm ready to heal. I'm ready to let go." There were no grand gestures, no dramatic speeches. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a woman who had lived through a lifetime of pain, who had finally found the courage to face it. And in that moment, I knew that healing wasn't just about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, to make peace with it, and to move forward despite it. We sat in silence for a while, each of us reflecting on what had just been said. The weight of the past was still there, still heavy on our shoulders. But for the first time, I felt a sense of hope. Nana was on her way to healing, and so were we. The aftermath of everything we had uncovered wasn't easy, but in a strange way, it felt like we were finally starting to rebuild. It wouldn't be perfect, and it wouldn't be quick. But we were on the right path, and that was enough for now. The final goodbye. It was a few weeks after our conversation with Nana that I began to notice something else. It wasn't drastic, but there was a change in the air. The weight of the past wasn't gone, but there was a sense of lightness that hadn't been there before. Nana had started to smile more, to laugh more. And though the old scars were still visible, they seemed to be fading. There were days when she looked out the window, lost in thought. But now there was a gentleness to her, an acceptance of her past that was slowly turning into peace. She didn't talk much about forgiveness anymore. It was as if she had found a quiet place inside herself where she could finally live with the truth without being consumed by it. And we, her family, her grandchildren, we were learning how to live with it too. The decision to have a final reckoning with her past, to confront everything she had kept hidden, had been a hard one. It wasn't a one-time conversation or a single moment of healing. It had been, and still was, an ongoing process. But with each passing day, I saw her letting go just a little bit more, piece by piece. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the room that day, the one with her walls built up so high. The Nana I had known all my life was still there, but now she was softer, more fragile, yet undeniably stronger for it. One evening, a few weeks later, I received a call from Ethan. His voice, though calm, carried an undercurrent of emotion. "Nana's asking for us," he said quietly. "She wants to talk." I felt my stomach tighten. I knew that we had reached a moment, a turning point. Nana had come so far in such a short time, but there were still so many pieces of the puzzle we hadn't quite fit together. What did she want to say now? What more could there be to discuss? I drove to her house, my heart beating faster with each mile. When I arrived, the house seemed different. The windows were open, the curtains blowing gently in the wind. The familiar smell of Nana's cooking wasn't in the air. It was quieter than usual. I stepped inside, finding Nana sitting in her favorite armchair, the one by the window. She wasn't reading or knitting, as she often did, but was simply staring out at the garden, lost in her thoughts. It was strange, seeing her like this, so still. Ethan was already there, sitting across from her. He looked up when I entered, his face drawn. "She wants to tell us something. I think it's time." I nodded, unsure of what to expect. I walked over and sat next to Nana, taking her hand in mine. The silence between us felt different this time. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, but almost like the calm before the storm. She looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read, but I could feel the gravity of the moment. "I'm ready," she said softly, her voice steady but carrying an emotional weight that I hadn't heard before. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about all of you, about what I want for the future. I've spent so many years carrying all of this guilt, fear, that I never gave myself the chance to heal. But now, I feel like I can finally let go." I didn't know what she meant exactly, but I could feel that this was the moment we had been waiting for, the moment where Nana, the woman who had always protected us, would finally give herself permission to be free. "How do you mean, Nana?" I asked, my voice low, almost hesitant. She took a deep breath, as if she were about to release something that had been held back for a lifetime. "I've been so afraid of losing all of you. that I didn't realize I was already losing myself. I thought by hiding the truth, by keeping everything inside, I was protecting you. But I wasn't. I've spent so many years carrying the weight of things I couldn't change, and now I see that the only way forward is to let go of that fear. Tears welled up in my eyes as I heard her speak these words that were so heavy, so full of realization, that it almost felt like I was hearing them for the first time. Nana had always been the one who held everything together, the one who kept us safe. But now, she was asking for our help, asking us to be the ones to hold her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for things I can't change," Nana continued, her voice trembling now. "I don't expect that. But I want you to know that I've done the best I could with the cards I was dealt, and I've come to realize that it's time for me to stop punishing myself. I need to forgive myself. For all of it." The words were simple, but they carried so much meaning. In that moment, I knew that Nana was no longer the woman who had tried to hide her pain. She was the woman who had finally let it go, who had finally freed herself from the shackles of a past she couldn't undo. I took her hand in both of mine, squeezing it gently. "You've been carrying this alone for so long," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But you don't have to anymore. We're here. We're here for you, always." Ethan nodded, his face solemn but full of understanding. "We love you, Nana. You've always been there for us, and we'll always be here for you." For the first time in a long while, Nana smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile, but it was real. It was the kind of smile that came from a place of deep relief, of acceptance. She didn't have to carry the burden of her past anymore. She didn't have to hide behind a mask of strength. "I'm ready to let go," she whispered, more to herself than to us. In that moment, I realized that we weren't just letting go of the past. Nana was letting go of the person she had been, the person who had been consumed by guilt and fear. She was stepping into something new, something raw and vulnerable, but also stronger than anything she had been before. And as we sat there, in the quiet of that room, I knew that this was the end of one chapter, but also the beginning of another. One where Nana and all of us could finally heal. Together. The quiet moment. The evening sun cast its golden glow across Nana's living room, filling the space with warmth that seemed to echo the change taking place within our family. For the first time in a long while, the silence felt peaceful. It wasn't heavy with secrets or unspoken words. It wasn't the silence that had once filled the house with tension. No, this silence was different. It was quiet, calm, as if the world had finally given us permission to breathe. Nana sat in her favorite armchair, the one by the window, and I couldn't help but notice how at ease she seemed. Her hands rested gently in her lap, her fingers no longer trembling with anxiety or fear. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't holding on to something. She wasn't carrying the weight of a past that had broken her. Instead, she was here, in this moment, with all of us. Ethan and I had stayed with her that evening. The house felt full, not with noise, but with a presence that was healing, that was coming back to life after years of darkness. We weren't in a rush. There was no need for more words. We had said what needed to be said, and now it was time for all of us to simply be together. The familiar sounds of the evening filtered through the open windows, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant hum of traffic as the world continued its endless march forward. But inside Nana's house, time seemed to slow, as if the world outside was no longer a part of us, no longer something we had to worry about. For once, we were living in the here and now. I sat beside Nana, the soft weight of her hand resting in mine, and we just watched the sunset together. Ethan, sitting across from us, had his head tilted back, eyes closed, as though he was savoring the stillness. For once, there was no rush, no urgency, no fear of what the future held. Nana's voice broke the silence, soft and reflective. I remember when this house was always filled with noise. Your grandfather's laughter, the sound of the kids playing outside, the music. It was always so loud, so full. But I've come to realize that sometimes the quietest moments are the most beautiful ones. I turned to her, surprised by the depth of her words. What do you mean? She smiled. A small, knowing smile that seemed to reach her eyes in a way that hadn't happened in years. I think I spent so much of my life chasing after the noise, the distractions, the things that made everything feel okay. But now I understand. The noise? It was all a way to avoid facing what I was really feeling. I thought if I could fill my life with enough activity, enough busyness, I could drown out the pain. But now, in the silence, I found something I didn't expect. Peace. And I think, for the first time in my life, I'm truly at peace. Her words hung in the air between us, and I realized something profound in that moment. Nana had spent so much of her life protecting everyone else, keeping things together for us, that she had forgotten how to take care of herself. She had been so focused on keeping the family safe that she had never allowed herself the grace to heal, to find peace in her own way. But now, sitting there in the quiet, she had finally found that peace. She wasn't holding on to anything anymore. She wasn't hiding from the past. She had accepted it, faced it, and learned to live with it. And in doing so, she had made space for the peace that had always been there, just waiting to be embraced. The sound of the wind picked up, causing the branches outside to sway and the leaves to rustle. It was a simple sound, one that might have gone unnoticed before, but now it felt like music to my ears. Nana had found her peace, and in that peace, we had all found a kind of healing. I squeezed her hand gently, my heart full of gratitude for the woman sitting beside me. She had given me so much throughout my life, love, wisdom, protection. But now, she had given me something even more precious, the gift of understanding, of knowing that healing wasn't just about moving forward. It was about embracing the quiet moments, the stillness, and allowing yourself to feel the weight of everything you had carried, without fear. Ethan opened his eyes, and I could see the same sense of peace on his face, the same understanding. We were all in this together, and we were learning to be present, to embrace the quiet moments, and to let go of the things that no longer served us. Nana stood up slowly, her movements a little more deliberate now. She walked over to the mantelpiece, where an old photograph of our family sat framed in gold. It was a picture of us at a family reunion years ago. Nana in the center, surrounded by everyone she loved. The picture had always been a reminder of how strong she had been, how much she had held us all together. I think it's time I let go of this picture, Nana said softly, picking it up and holding it in her hands. It's been with me for so long, but I'm not the woman in this photo anymore. I've changed. We've all changed. I felt a pang in my chest as I realized what she meant. That picture represented a time when things seemed simpler, when we all had our places in the world. But time had passed, and we had all grown. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for us to embrace the new versions of ourselves, the ones that had emerged from the pain, from the healing, from the lessons learned. Nana placed the photo gently on the table and turned back to us, her face calm, her eyes clear. It's not goodbye to the past, you know, she said, her voice full of understanding. It's just letting go of the parts that no longer serve us. We can carry the love, carry the memories, but we don't have to carry the weight anymore. I nodded, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. Nana had finally let go of the things that had been holding her down, and in doing so, she had given all of us the permission to do the same. We weren't just letting go of the past, we were letting it breathe, letting it exist without drowning us. And in that moment I realized that Nana wasn't just a woman who had lived through hardship. She was a woman who had found her way back to herself, and she was showing us how to do the same. The quiet moment stretched on, and I didn't want it to end. There was nothing more we needed to say. We were here, together, and that was enough. The ending of one story, the beginning of another days turned into weeks, and life slowly began to shift. What had once been a house filled with heavy, unspoken truths and tension was now a home with room to breathe. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a miracle that wiped away the past, but it was something. It was progress. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Nana, for me, for all of us. We had made peace with the past, and now it was time to live in the present. Nana's spirit, which had always been strong, but buried under years of hardship, was beginning to emerge again. And so were we. The weight of her history no longer overshadowed our lives. We were learning to embrace the quiet moments together, to let go of what no longer served us, and to accept the changes that had come with time. It was a new season for our family, one that had been long overdue. I found myself returning to Nana's house more often. Each visit felt lighter than the last, as if the space around us was breathing easier, more freely. There were still days when Nana would retreat into her own thoughts, her mind wandering back to the past, but there were more days when she would sit with us, her grandchildren, telling stories of the good times, of the adventures she'd had when she was young, when life had been filled with possibilities. I remember one particular evening when Nana was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, the soft evening light casting a warm glow over her face. She looked at me, her eyes full of a softness I hadn't seen before. "You know," she said, her voice gentle, "I never thought I'd get to this point. I thought I would always be that woman, the one who carried the weight of everything, the one who tried to protect everyone but never allowed herself to be protected. But now, I can finally see what I've been missing." I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. There was no rush to this moment, no urgency. We had time. We had the space to just be together, without the shadows of the past looming over us. "I've been thinking," she continued, her voice thoughtful, "about what comes next. What comes after we've let go of all the old hurts? What do we do then?" It was a question I hadn't really considered. We had spent so much time dealing with the past, trying to make sense of it, trying to heal from it, that I hadn't thought about what the future looked like once we were free of its grip. But Nana's question made me pause. What did come next? What did we do when we no longer had the weight of unspoken truths holding us back? "We live, Nana," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "We live without fear. We live without the weight of the past. We live in the moments we have now, with the people who love us." Nana smiled, her eyes softening with something like relief. "I think you're right. I've been afraid for so long, afraid of letting go of what I couldn't control. But now I see that it's okay to let go. It's okay to move on." We sat together for a while, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves outside the window, the world turning quietly around us. It was a peaceful moment, the kind of moment I had always wanted with Nana, the kind I had dreamed of when I was younger. But I realized that it had taken us a long time to get here. a journey through pain and healing, through secrets and revelations. And now, we were finally standing on the other side, ready to face whatever came next, together. Later that evening, as the sun set and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I went outside to the backyard, where Nana's garden had always been her pride and joy. The flowers she had carefully planted and tended to were in full bloom, vibrant and alive. For a moment I simply stood there, taking it all in. The colors of the flowers, the cool evening breeze, the way the world seemed to slow down when you allowed yourself to simply be present. I thought about the journey we had all been on, Nana, Ethan, me, and the rest of our family. We had faced the darkness, the weight of the past, and had come through it. We had embraced the quiet, the uncomfortable silences, the hard conversations. And now, it felt like we were finally able to embrace the beauty that came after all of it. When I went back inside, I found Nana sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her. She looked up at me, her expression thoughtful but peaceful. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for everything, for not giving up on me, for not letting me stay in the past." I smiled and sat down next to her. "You don't have to thank me, Nana. You did the hard part. You faced it, and you let go." She reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not easy to let go. It's not easy to face the things you've been running from. But I'm learning. I'm learning that I don't have to carry it anymore." And as we sat together, in the quiet comfort of the kitchen, I knew that the healing wasn't over. It would take time, and it would be messy at times. But we had come so far already, and we would continue to walk this path together. We would continue to face the future with the knowledge that we had finally made peace with the past. I thought about everything Nana had taught me, about love, about sacrifice, about strength, and most importantly, about forgiveness. The lessons had never been more real, never more necessary, and in that moment, I realized that we had finally found the peace we had been searching for. Not in erasing the past, but in accepting it. Not in forgetting, but in letting go. The journey wasn't over, but we were on our way. The message. The air was still and calm as I sat beside Nana on the front porch, the day drawing to a quiet close. The sun had sunk behind the horizon, leaving the sky painted in hues of lavender and deep blue. The faint hum of the crickets and the occasional rustle of the leaves in the breeze were the only sounds breaking the peaceful silence. Nana and I were wrapped in a comfortable quiet, a quiet that wasn't heavy with unsaid words, but one that was filled with understanding. Nana, now looking more at peace than she had in years, stared out at the twilight, her fingers resting lightly on the railing. I could see the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she took in the moment, her eyes soft but sharp, full of a kind of wisdom that could only come from a life well lived. A life of strength, struggle, and now, acceptance. "You know," she began, her voice steady but tinged with reflection, "all these years, I thought the key to surviving was to keep going no matter what. I thought that if I just kept moving forward, if I kept protecting you all, that I'd somehow make everything better. But what I've learned is that survival isn't just about moving forward. It's about learning how to live with what's behind you. It's about facing the things you thought you couldn't face." Her words were simple, yet they resonated deeply. Over the years, Nana had always been the strong one, the protector, the one who kept the family together, no matter the cost. But in that moment, I realized how much she had been holding back, how much she had been carrying on her own. The truth, once buried, had finally come to the surface, and now she was free. "That's the hardest part," I said softly, my voice filled with a quiet understanding. We think that letting go means forgetting, but it doesn't. It just means accepting it. Accepting that we can't change the past, but we can choose how we let it shape us. Nana nodded slowly, her expression serene. It's the hardest lesson I've ever had to learn, but it's the most important one. And I think, for the first time, I'm ready to live without the weight of it all. Without the fear, without the guilt. The breeze stirred again, gently moving the hair that had begun to silver at her temples. There was something sacred in the air, something intangible yet deeply felt. The burden that had shadowed her for so long, the burden that had colored her every decision, every relationship, was finally being put down. And though the past would always be a part of her, she had come to understand that it didn't have to define her future. We can't change the past, she said, her voice thick with emotion, but we can change how we live with it. I've spent so long punishing myself, thinking that the only way to survive was to bury everything. But now I see, the only way to truly survive is to acknowledge it, to share it, and to forgive myself for what I couldn't control. Her words landed in my heart like a quiet revelation. The pain she had carried for so long had been buried, not because she wanted to forget, but because she thought that holding on to it was the only way to protect us. She had kept it inside, hidden, because she believed that her past could break us. But in sharing it, in releasing it, she had not only freed herself, but she had allowed us to heal together. The sun had fully set now, leaving a soft darkness that enveloped us in its quiet embrace. The first star appeared in the sky, twinkling faintly against the darkened canvas above. Nana looked up at the star, her gaze distant but peaceful. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice full of quiet wonder. "That star. It reminds me that no matter how dark the night gets, there's always something out there that shines. We just have to look for it. We just have to believe it's still there." I nodded, taking a deep breath as I looked up at the sky. The stars had always been there, even on the darkest nights. Nana had taught me that, not just through her words, but through her actions. She had shown me that even in the most difficult times, there was always light to be found if you were brave enough to seek it. "I think we've found it, Nana," I said quietly, squeezing her hand. "I think we've found the light." Nana smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe we have. Maybe we have." We sat in silence for a while, just the two of us, watching the stars and listening to the world around us. In that moment, I understood something profound. Healing wasn't a destination, nor was it an end. It was a journey, one that we all had to take, individually and together. We had faced the past, and though it wasn't easy, it had given us the space to move forward. Nana had shown us that it was possible to find peace, even after the most painful of journeys. As the night deepened and the stars grew brighter, I knew that our family was stronger than it had ever been. We had faced the hardest truths, the darkest moments, but we had done it together. And in that togetherness, we had found something more powerful than just survival. We had found the courage to live fully, without fear, without shame, and with a deep, abiding love that could carry us through whatever came next. I looked over at Nana, and for the first time, I saw her truly free. The burden she had carried for so long was gone, and in its place, there was a quiet strength that came from having faced everything and still standing. "Thank you, Nana," I whispered, the words feeling both simple and profound. She turned to me, her eyes soft with understanding. "Thank you for being here, for seeing me, for helping me let go." In the quiet of that moment, with the stars shining above us and the night wrapping us in its embrace, I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter for all of us, and it was one we would write together. Thank you for joining us today and listening to this moving tale. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to share where you're watching from, and let's keep the conversation going. For more heartwarming stories like this, check out our next video. We're just getting started.